Welcome back to another episode of the Boxscore Geeks Show. Brian, I come to you from the past, failed at my attempt to get a Victor Wembenyama rookie card, but I don't know if you're able to see this pre-show. I'm not mad. I was able to acquire an autograph Artist Gilmore card in my box of NBA Hoops 2023-24. So I'm not upset. We got a lot to talk, Brian, although a lot of it's in our wheelhouse, so let's get going. This is the Boxscore Geek Show. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, found most places Nerd Numbers. With me, as always, is my producer, voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster, found on Twitter, X, whatever, as Boxscore Brian. Say hey, Brian.
Yeah, what's going on? Little bit, worn down from the Super Bowl this weekend. It was tough for the Bay Area. We took a loss to the Swifties in Kansas City, but that's okay. Happy for them in their win, but still nonetheless, we got the Warriors now to contend with here in the Bay Area.
Well, here's an annoying thing, and maybe I'm just too beaten down by politics and stuff, but I am like in a weird mood of like happy sad where it's going. I wonder, this would be a good question asked like Jonathan Weiler, when you piss off right-wing sports fans with like a loss, do they take it out of the polls or does it not matter at all? Because I'm just like, maybe you give them the win, right? Like, remember, I think years ago, like the Cleveland Indians or whatever were close to winning a title, and then they didn't. They like blew a big lead, and people got upset because like, oh, our heritage to be able to say racist phrases. I'm like, should you just
Sorry
like
for laughing. I'm sorry.
If you placate extremists with sports victories, does that offset bad voting decisions? I'm curious about that. I don't have a theory, so that's kind of my point is, now that the 49ers have lost, which is, hilarious on so many fronts, where San Francisco, you've got right wingers being like, San Francisco, the last bastion of true whatever. We lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. Oh no. Would it have been better had the 49ers won in like the 2024 polling results and stuff? Probably not. I'm probably just grasping at straws.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to your question, but the answer 90-something% of the time in cases like this is that it does not matter. Even people are saying, presidential polls for 2024, we're reading into those a lot right now. It's pretty far out, Dre. It's almost still a year until the election. It's 10 months or whatever. Those polls they don't matter that much. So if the polls don't matter, football definitely doesn't matter. That's my point.
Okay, I'll take it. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. So I was able to catch the first half of the game. Then I had to miss the second half of the game with like bedtime and stuff. And then I was able to come back and catch overtime in box score format. It was actually funny because I was like a half second behind. So I was texting a friend and I was like, do you think Kansas City can pull this off? And he's like, they just did. So that was definitely fun. A lot of fun things. I mean, we can wrap a few topics that we had before. By the way, just top level for the show. Really, we're just going to like do an update on the MVP race, talk if Carmelo Anthony was lying, talk if Doc Rivers is a bad coach, and talk if we think the All-Star reserves were good, well picked. Spoiler alert, unlike the starters, we were less than enthused by the backup. But anyway, but let's start with a little appetizer. Let's start with the Super Bowl, which is a heck of a lot of fun. Something we said last week, and I think remains true, is just it is ridiculous that Patrick Mahomes kind of at this point is almost like Bjorn Borg, where he could retire right now and be an all-time great. And it was an interesting comparable. I'm going to throw this out to Adam Todd Brown, who made the comparison. Where I would say Mahomes is this right now, but maybe before you could call Joe Montana. I would say that Tom Brady is kind of like LeBron James, right? Longevity, a career span that no one will match, but Joe Montana and maybe now Patrick Mahomes are the Michael Jordan, right? These people that just had this like peak of success that is just absurd.
That's really interesting. Well, so First of all, Joe Montana is obviously God here where I live. That being
Yep.
said, like modern football analysts have looked down on him a little bit. That he had Jerry Rice and all these Hall of Famers around him, and maybe Montana himself or his numbers were not as good, and he relied on his teammates. Maybe he was the real game manager, not Brock Purdy. I mean, it's such a different era. It's hard to make those comparisons. What was the second part though, Dre? That was what I really wanted to
Oh, really?
reply
Just
to.
at this point, is like Mahomes? Is he
Oh,
like,
Mahomes. Yes,
he's like the?
yes,
I said he was like a Bjorn Borg, and maybe this gets
he's
weird.
so
Maybe
good.
he has surpassed. If you're doing that comparison, if you were saying, Brady is to Braun as Joe Montana is to MJ, question is, and I know I'm asking a San Francisco guy this who just had to deal with the loss, could you now replace Joe Montana
Well,
with
so
Patrick
this
Mahomes?
conversation was happening leading up to the game, right? They're saying if Mahomes wins what he did win, his now third Super Bowl victory, where does he fit in this conversation? Specifically versus Brady, of course he doesn't have the longevity yet. He's still very young. He's in his late 20s. Is he even in his prime yet? Like maybe even 30s is your prime for a quarterback these days. But his 5 or 6 year prime, I forget what they were looking at, might be similar to Brady's. It might actually be that good. Now, it's not different eras, but it's a little bit more in the future for Mahomes. Maybe he's got more modern offense to deal with and better coaching than Brady might have had in the old days before Belichick really figured everything out. It's tough to say for sure, but he is on track to be LeBron plus Michael Jordan is the way I look at
That's
Mahomes.
ridiculous.
He does look like Brady and maybe even better.
And I'm dropping this. This is driving me nuts. But I think it was the Dallas Cowboy quarterback commentator that said
Oh.
something like, "Talk about Patrick Mahomes when he has his 30 as many Super Bowls as I do." And then someone found that tweet from 3 years ago. This was 2019.
Was it
It's
Troy
like
Aikman maybe? I don't
it
know.
was Troy
Yeah,
Aikman. You
he's a
got
big
it.
time commentator
Yes.
now.
So Troy Aikman was just like, it was one of these like, how great is Mahomes? Because when he bust on the scene and had like his first MVP year, I remember that was ridiculous. It was just like hadn't been seen. And so, Aikman was like, he can talk when he's got a third as many Super Bowls as I do. Because how many does Aikman have?
Oh, he had at least 3, maybe 4,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it is
But
worth
then
pointing
that,
out again, people that look at numbers and coaches that break down tape, they're like, Aikman not so good really. He kind of got carried by the Cowboys as well.
well, it's so rough to know, and I know the same is probably true of what not Howie Long, other famous Pittsburgh Steeler. I'm missing his name.
Okay, how long was Raiders? He was Raiders.
Um, well, Howie Long commentates with him, so I'm thinking of the Pittsburgh Steelers guy.
Oh, was it? Let's see, the coach Bill Cowher,
No,
the
yeah,
former coach.
bald guy starting a bunch of stuff, starting failure to launch.
I know who it is, but I'm
Really?
not digging it up.
Failure to launch football guy. All right, let's get this because if I forget this, I'm going to drive myself crazy. And actually, he showed up, so he was on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm gonna get this name, Terry Bradshaw. Oh my God,
Oh, of course.
he was actually hilarious
Yeah.
because he showed up on Modern Family with Ed O'Neill, and Ed O'Neill was famously cut from the Pittsburgh Steelers back in the day.
Oh,
And
I
the
didn't know
plot,
that. That's funny.
the plot line in the show was
Is
that,
that why Married with Children had that plot line?
yeah, a lot of the former footballer Ed O'Neill takes that in a lot of his roles, and he had that legit. And what's interesting is he's talked about it and basically noted that he got cut by the Pittsburgh Steelers and did have other opportunities to play football. This was pre everything being absurd because of course he was like close to 40, if not in his 40s, when Married with Children hit prominence, and that was in the
Mm.
80s. So that should tell you, when he was playing football, it wasn't what it is now. It wasn't the same money. He like had other opportunities and he chose to quit because when he was in the football locker rooms, this was back in the day, so old school, he was just like, these people are all beat up and bruised up and have lots of scars and limps, and he's just like, yeah, I'm not going to spend my life chasing this if that's the end result. So, but anyway, yeah, he was about, Terry Bradshaw, I've heard similar stuff on the numbers where it's just really hard to gauge. Patrick Mahomes, of course, that is not the case. Is he the modern day? Is he the GOAT? Like, I mean, pretty much Tom Brady is the only person left. And if he has a long career, who knows what can happen.
Yeah, no, that's what it is. He's just got to stay healthy, and he's got everything that Brady has and more. He's got the arm, he's got the knowledge and the intelligence, and he can make the throws out of structure. Mahomes is actually, his play style is a lot more like Aaron Rodgers. He's very similar to Aaron Rodgers the way he plays. But
He's
he
an
has
Aaron
Brady's...
Rodgers that doesn't choke.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is Aaron Rodgers is famously not a, big time studier like Brady is. So anyway, or the Manning brothers.
Yeah, and I'm, with all this stuff that happened with Aaron Rodgers, I'm kind of happy if he's been usurped in the like top QB discussions this quickly. It barely lasted. Now let's see, where do I want to go next? Let's go to a silly topic, just for people that don't know this. Although I think if you're fans of this show, you do, which is Doc Rivers a bad coach? I only bring this up. We'll relate it back to the Super Bowl because Kyle Shanahan. I think he's failed several times now. The 49ers have a ring, but is it not with Shanahan? Like a recent ring?
Yeah, that's right. The 49ers have 5 Super Bowl wins, and they won their first 5 Super Bowls that they went to. But that has not been since 1995, which is the 1994
Oh, wait, so they
season.
haven't won any of the recent trips to the Super Bowl. That's a bummer.
No, they are 0-3 in their last 3 trips, which are all in the last 10 years.
And then what?
2 of those are Kyle Shanahan. 1 was Jim Harbaugh.
And are both of those against the Chiefs?
Yeah, actually, yeah. That's right.
Oof, that's. I mean, that's
both
MJ
were comebacks from like 10 points in the second half.
And that is as MJ as it gets, right? Where here's the thing, I'm sad from a stats perspective that Malone and Stockton, 2 of the greatest all time by the numbers, didn't get a ring. As much as I've had to say about MJ's attitude and some of his legacy, I am so happy that Stockton and Malone didn't get a ring that I'm willing to put up with people calling MJ better than Braun till the end of time, if that was the cost. So is what it is. But anyway, so Doc Rivers, is he a bad coach? And the relation was Kyle Shanahan, because Kyle Shanahan, as you've noted, has lost 2 or 3 times in the Super Bowl now. The 49ers he's lost twice.
I should point out also, Dre, that he was the offensive coordinator for the Falcons, and
oh my God,
and they had a massive comeback against the Falcons, and Shanahan got blamed for that, even though he wasn't the head coach. So that's when it began for him.
But was that when they tried to kick instead of doing something and gave up the ball? Like the other team shouldn't have had an opportunity. I remember the Seahawks and Falcons and back in really close proximity, if not back-to-back Super Bowls, basically gave Tom Brady a win, where Tom Brady, he couldn't, as great as he is, he couldn't do it. Oh, thumbs up on the, I've heard about this. This is on Mac. If you do thumbs up, it detects it. Fun times. But I was going to say that, yeah, as great as Tom Brady is, you can't really give him credit if the way his team won is the opposing team, when he was sitting on the bench, gave back the ball or whatever. So is what it is. So Kyle Shanahan, as related to Doc Rivers, and friend of the show, Ty Willinghams, was saying, hey, is he going to get fired like Doc Rivers? Is he going to get blamed like Doc Rivers? Because Doc Rivers, notoriously has the most 3-1 upsets for a single coach. In fact, he's the only coach with more than 1. There have been 14 3-1 playoff upsets. What that means for you, for those that don't know, it should be odd if you're here again. In a best of 7 series, when one team is up 3-1, the opposing team is not supposed to be able to come back. And in fact, if it weren't for recent history, a lot of which is Doc Rivers, this was super rare. I think into the 90s, there's a Wikipedia article I was looking up on it, but it's there are 14 total. There are 14 total in NBA history, and if I do 13 total. Sorry, 13 total NBA history. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of those 13 are in the past 10 years, and in the past 10 years, the two of them. Yeah, so Doc Rivers gave up the Clippers in the 2015 semifinals, and then of course, and that was to the Houston Rockets, and then he also lost to the Denver Nuggets. So he's done it twice, and then he did it back in the day with Orlando against the Detroit Pistons. So Doc Rivers, first coach to give up 3-1 upsets in NBA history for a coach. First to give up two, and it's happened 13 times. And we were comparing this to Shanahan, where it's going, yeah, Shanahan's given up 3 Super Bowl wins, right? But we were just saying the exact thing. Like, I think 2 or 3 of those, all 3 of those, like, one possession games came down to one of the last plays.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Yeah, that's why the coach gets blamed, right? Because if the coach had done something different, maybe the game could have changed. But of course, the players are the ones actually on the field deciding it.
Well, and it's Rand, we were talking this last week about why football, or 2 weeks ago, why football is so awesome and horrible simultaneously. Because we were saying Patrick and I come from a poker probabilistic background where we're like, okay, you go all in and you're supposed to win 70% of the time. Well, you're going to lose some of the time. Or you go all in, you're supposed to win 30% of the time, but you got odds where you only need to win 15% of the time to make it worth it. So you lost, but it was the right call. And we said football starts getting so ticky-tack where some of these plays are like the analytics say 55% go for it, 45% don't. And the net impact on wins is almost negligible in that case. You were saying when the Lions blew their big lead against the 49ers, a lot of the plays they did were like 50-50. So you end up with that exact scenario. I do have to ask about one play that I have not researched. I promise I wasn't going to do this before the show. I do think the 49ers had a missed extra point. Did they try and go for it on 2, or did they just miss a kick?
No, they actually missed a kick.
Oh.
Yeah. So the kicker took some blame for that, but he also made 2 55-yard field goals in that game. So everyone's saying, oh, well, he missed the extra point, but he made those 2 big-time kicks, so we can't really blame him, right? He actually had a good game.
That is bizarre, right? That's like...
Well, the extra points
just
it's not a gimme anymore. It used to be like a 90, high 90% kick, but they moved it back, and now it's a lower percentage kick than it used to be.
How often do people miss it at this point?
I'm not sure, but I think they miss at least like 5 to 10% more. Like, it's very significant. Like, it almost never used to get missed. And now when they miss an extra point, you're like, yeah, that happens. That's not that uncommon.
All right. Okay. I'll give it to you.
It's a more exciting play that way. And also it means if the kick isn't automatic, then maybe going for 2 is a little more compelling, right? So it's changed the strategy in an interesting way.
But even in that point, though, what's frustrating is you can go, you were saying this pre-show where people were like, oh, if they hadn't missed that extra kick, they would have won because, right, they went to overtime on a 1-point thing.
Yep.
There is not that would have changed the strategy, though, of the Chiefs, right? Then the Chiefs might throw more and try and go for a touchdown instead of 3 points.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's so hard to say, and football is so random where one drop pass, one missed extra point, all of this comes into it. It goes into overtime. The one bit of consternation I heard, last question I'll ask, I saw a lot of debate about this, is they changed the rules. So there's 5 extra minutes in overtime.
Yeah.
And there was a debate as to if Shanahan overthought it and if the Chiefs knew it. And then I don't know how much of a rumor or myth or whatever this is, but some folks were saying that some 49ers players weren't even aware of the changed rules.
Yeah, that's what they said. There was a thing today saying we did put in a plan for overtime at the beginning of the playoffs. So maybe the players just forgot about it. It's not clear to me how much it matters to individual players, right? Because they're just doing their jobs on the field. They're not, making strategy at all. I think the big thing people are wondering about in terms of high-level strategy is, should you have done it more like the college overtime strategy because it's not sudden death? So what I mean by that is the 49ers won the coin toss and elected to receive. And that's considered to be bad strategy in college where both teams get the ball because you want to see what the other team does first. If they make a touchdown, you have to get one as well. But then if you do what the 49ers did going first, you kick a field goal, they can just kick a touchdown and win. You have no way to respond. I don't know mathematically how big of an advantage that is, but strategically, intuitively, it does seem like a mistake. Like you'd want to, when your strategy, is going second is so pivotal on how they go first and you could just lose outright. Yeah, it seems dicey to me.
That's a little interesting. It's like it's almost the opposite of chess, but chess has the same idea. So chess is a sport that I think computers have basically cracked like it is a draw, but there is a theory that white might have an advantage just because it moves first, it gets an extra tempo. And you're kind of saying that's true, but the same kind of logic, but in reverse for football.
I didn't explain the rule, so let me explain the rule. That makes it make a lot more sense. So the rule used to be sudden death. If you score any points, touchdown or field goal, you just win the game. And so the other team wouldn't even get a chance to go on the field with their offense if you had the ball first and scored. That was the rule for a long time, and everyone hated it, so they finally changed it. Now both offenses get a chance at the very least. So even if they score a touchdown, you have a chance to score a touchdown to tie them, and then it goes to sudden death. And then it's just like I said, right? If it's tied after each team gets a possession, it goes on. So that's
but
why.
You said it's sudden death after that. So
Yeah.
So here's where you could go both ways, right? Because Kyle Shanahan said he wanted to go third. So his logic is, okay, let's get the ball first. Let's assume that however, the game's been close already. Let's assume that we can score or stop as well as they can. If we get a field goal, we can hold them to a field goal. If we get a touchdown, then we probably win. But if not, if they get a touchdown, we get to go third and it's sudden death. This is rough. I would really like to see the game theory on that with the sudden death edition.
Because here's the opposite argument, Dre. What if, because this might have been what they were thinking, what if we go first and we score a touchdown? That puts a lot of pressure on their offense. They can't play for a field goal anymore. They might have to change their strategy to try to get a touchdown, and that will limit their options, let us pass. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, you're right.
There was one point, though, and this is where I could give it to you if you didn't know the time, because the other advantage, right, is if it's a tie, if the overtime is shorter and you go first with that exact logic, we can match them and go again. And then they run out of time, we can win. The extra time might have done it, but it sounds like Shanahan had a strategy, and we've always had this. Whether or not it was the right strategy or not, it's hard to know. But he had a strategy. He was close. If you make it to overtime in a playoff game, in a game-deciding game, I really, really struggle with saying that's a failure. Unless the one way I would be able to say it as a failure, and this gets back to Doc Rivers, and I'll wrap up the point why he's not a good coach, is if you were the overwhelming favorites. And the fact of the matter is, the Kansas City Chiefs were the favorite going into the game. I'm sure the advanced stats agree. Vegas agreed with that.
Thought I saw the Niners were slightly favored in some, but the point is that neither team was a big favorite.
I looked it up because I did. I'll do my shout out early. I did the You Don't Even Like Sports live show with Adam Todd Brown and Jeff May last Wednesday. We recorded. I'm not sure. Like, all I know is I went to FanDuel and looked up the book odds, and Kansas City was +3. Like, the spread was that they were supposed to win by a field goal. Close.
That's
right?
What I would expect it to be roughly. I mean, I think that's.
And they won by 4, just piss off the bettors, right? That's what you got to do.
Right. Vegas does a good job.
Yeah, that's what's got with betting getting so big. It is hilarious to see people. By the way, Brian, do you want to know an annoying, frustrating stat that just shows how ridiculous this sport is? You probably already know the answer to this. This is a softball for sure. In the 2023 season, according to StatMuse, guess which team attempted the most extra points in the NFL?
It was probably the 49ers.
If you guess the 49ers with 61 extra field goal attempts, you would be right.
They were the best offense, and their coach is considered to be conservative, so that makes sense.
Now let's ask one more question that's going to put salt in the wound. Guess which team had the highest extra field goal points percent in the NFL in the 2023 season?
He means in terms of the kicker making the kick?
Yeah, like free throw attempts, basically, if we're asking.
It was probably Jake Moody. He hadn't missed before that.
It was the 49ers.
Yeah,
98.4%. 60 out of 61 extra field points. how sucky, and that's the stupid sport, right? Like literally the best extra point, and you even mentioned made like 250. It's such a rough sport, and that's the difference between this and the NBA. NBA, you have these long series. Variance is going to normalize. The better team is supposed to win. NFL, you don't have that. And the last point where I was saying the one place where you could say, I'm just like the inferior team by the numbers took the game to overtime. That is not a loss. Whereas the one example is Doc Rivers does have one ring. He has a ring with the 2008 Celtics. And here's the thing: that team, by the numbers, maybe this year though, Brian. Let's look this up really quick. Let's see if this is under threat. But the 2008 Celtics, by the numbers, were the greatest team in Celtics history. Actually, Brian, this is fun. This is fun. They might actually be in danger of losing that distinction to, guess what? This year's Celtics team. But up until this year, the 2008 Celtics were the greatest Celtics teams by strength of schedule adjusted point margin we had ever seen. And in the first round of the playoffs, they went to a game 7 against the Atlanta Hawks, who had a losing record. And then in the next round of the playoffs, they went to a game 7 against, admittedly, LeBron James, who is amazing. They went to a game 7 against the 45-win LeBron James-led Cleveland Cavaliers. And you may remember that in 2007, the Spurs just picked apart LeBron James's Cavaliers. They were just like, sorry, LeBron James is great, but we're amazing. By the way, Brian, this year's Celtics is currently the best Celtics team in Celtics history. If they can keep it up for another 20 some odd games, that's ridiculous. So my simple point about Doc Rivers is the one time he won, he vastly underperformed how well that team should have performed in the playoffs. He has, like, as a comparison, in baseball, there have been 24 perfect games thrown. If a pitcher threw 3 perfect games all time, that would be ridiculous. In fact, now I'm really curious about that. Most perfect games pitcher. I don't even think Nolan Ryan has one, right?
Oh, he might. He's got some no-hitters at the very least.
Yeah, well, but I mean, for those that don't know, in baseball, a no-hitter means exactly what it sounds like. You don't give up any hits, but that you can still give up a walk or bean someone. In baseball, a perfect game occurs.
No one ever gets on base.
No one gets on base, period, which is ridiculously hard. And I'm just trying to see if
because if you're not giving up a lot of hits, that means you may be giving up walks, right? Because you're not near the plate.
Exactly. Okay. Oh no, that's just numbered. So I'm trying to see if anybody gave up multiple. Oh, there of course have been multiple pitcher. There have been the cases where a team. So when I look up the word multiple, when I look up the name multiple, I am not seeing any pitcher. Sandy Koufax might be the other one. I'm not seeing any pitcher have multiple perfect games. Randy Johnson, who also killed a bird, he's the only one that did that.
Yeah, like one of the famous perfect games was Don Larson for the Yankees in the World Series, and Don Larson was, good pitcher, but not like one of their Hall of Famers or anything.
Brooklyn Dodgers 0-2 at the Yankees. Good memory. That happened in 1956.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm just saying, if any pitcher did that 3 times, you'd be like, this is spectacular. Like, at this point, Doc Rivers' playoff performance speaks for itself, and it's ridiculously bad. Unlike Kyle Shanahan, where we gave Shanahan like his accolades and dues. He took a team that was supposed to lose to overtime. That's why he's great. Doc Rivers took one of the greatest teams of all time and had them on the brink of defeat 2 times before they finally came back to play like they were supposed to. By the way, I do want to give a brief shout out to that team just because they came up. Let's throw out that we get to pat ourselves on the back a little bit about the Boston Celtics, because I was dour on them preseason briefly. I was like, Arturo is rating this team too high. And then I looked over the numbers and was like, nope, he's actually right. We said about 50, like, don't touch the over-under at 58. We thought that was well placed. And they're on their way to like 60-plus wins. Currently, Vegas has them at like plus 6,000 to win the conference, which is absurd, by the way, because you could have a cool running scenario. Jason Tatum could fall over and roll into Derek White. What is interesting about this team that I'll throw out to you, they're smacking a lot of the 2009 Lakers. They have a lot of really, really good players. Jason Tatum close to star level, although he's playing big. He's so rough because it's very Dirk Nowitzki. Jason Tatum really is a small forward that's playing as a power forward, and he's playing it really well. So, maybe he can count as a star. We loved Derek White last year. Derek White had us not super scared about losing Marcus Smart. And Drew, and picking up Drew Holiday was good because basically Tatum, White, Drew Holiday,
and Brogdon. They traded all their guards.
Yeah, Brogdon. Yeah, and there's been weird stuff. Now where I get a little worried are two players, and we mentioned both. Now, one is it's really weird because he's getting a lot of accolades. Kristaps Porzingis, he is shooting close to 70% true shooting, Brian, which is like a 5% jump in his all time. It's ridiculous. Even with that as a center, he's fine. This is an NBA league with centers like Rudy Gobert and when he was healthy, Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. Like, it's funny to be like a center that shoots 70% true shooting. Sorry, shoots 70% true shooting, and I think we've kind of said this. He might have been a good defensive center before all the injuries, but after the injuries, we think that Kristaps Porzingis has kind of lost a step, and that's really reflected in the fact that he's a below-average rebounder. He is an above-average blocker, but blocking is, if this makes sense, blocking is like if you're super tall, it's just going to happen. Rebounding is where you actually have to move. So he is a below-average rebounder, above-average blocker, kind of so-so on the other stuff. So it's like he is really good at shooting, and in historical NBA would be quite good. Like, what's funny, this is an easy one to do. So his adjusted production is 448, which means not adjusted for position and not adjusted for league. That's just the raw number of points he puts up. Now, the annoying part about that, though, is you have to adjust for the league you're in. So if you took Kristaps Porzingis back to 2001 when Shaquille O'Neal won MVP, or actually that was 2000 when he won MVP. 2001 is Allen Iverson's MVP. Never speak that name to me, one of the worst MVPs of all time. Basically, Kristaps Porzingis in 2000 looks like an MVP center. In 2024, though, he does not. So that's what's always hard about these numbers, and that's why it's really hard to tell people. We're like, oh, we think this player is overrated. And they're like, oh, he's putting up numbers like Shaq or whatever. And you're like, yeah, but he's putting up numbers like Shaq in an era where Shaq numbers are pedestrian, but still rather good. Like when Kristaps Porzingis came to the team, I think I said, if he is able to play close to average, and I was expecting like 0.75, 0.8, so like 80% as good as an average starter, the Celtics would be more than fine. And he is playing amazing. The player that does worry me is Al Horford is currently the fourth best player, just by production, on the Celtics. But he is old, and last playoffs got beat up. But we're going to throw out your boy, Luke Cornett. only 600 minutes played, 550, but playing quite well. And in fact, I'm going to need to look up this name, Brian, because otherwise I'm going to butcher it and just feel terrible. But there's another. Basically, the Celtics last season had a weak front court because they had Al Horford and not much else. And they have actually fixed that. And the player is Numiash Keita. So Numiash Keita off the bench, really good per minute. And I'm actually curious if, like, the other thing, because I'm now starting to wonder if there's just something in the Celtics that wasn't Brad Stevens. Because back in the day, I used to think this was Brad Stevens. My take to you would be, if you have a good player, think Kyrie Irving coming to the Celtics. Don't underestimate them. Because I was like, Kyrie Irving's a good player, but he's not that great. He got better on the Celtics. And I'm like, flip side, if a good player leaves the Celtics, you don't know. Yeah, Keita, you can't have any idea because he's only played 150 minutes. But he's got off the bench. So it's like the Celtics don't have, let me see if they have any weaknesses. They don't, Brian. Svi.
You're saying in terms of sketchy players in their rotation.
I'm talking players that worry me. So,
yeah.
And I've messed up his name before, so let's get.
No, all of everyone's pretty solid. Peyton Pritchard's getting some more minutes. He's kind of solid.
Svi McKay Luke. Cool. All right, I like it. He is the only bad player. Delano
He's
Banton
not really a factor, yeah.
is weak, and he has played a grand total of 168 minutes,
Okay.
and that could just be garbage time. No, okay, Brian. Actually, I'm looking at this. If you go to the Box Score Geeks page on the Celtics, Tatum, White, Holiday, Horford, Brown. Brown overpaid, but it's like doesn't you are allowed to overplay for average if you are a contender. I'll throw that out. We've said that before. Tatum, White, Holiday, Horford, Brown, Peyton Pritchard. Another. I mean, they just have good. Like the Celtics just get good guards, right? Ridiculous. Sam Hauser, Kristaps Porzingis, Luke Cornett, O'Shea Brissett, Keita, who we just talked about. It's not until you get to Banton where they have a below average player. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Celtics have 11 players that are all playing above average. And I think it's the same. I think order is identical, where their top 11 by minutes played and their top 11 by production, shocker, are the same in terms of the same set of players, not in the same order, all above average. Where you could potentially get in trouble, and we saw this hit the Spurs, is come playoff time, are you going to run into the problem where the top can't compete with other teams' top? And here's what is really frustrating, Brian. I think that they have a clear path in the East this year. I think that we already talked this preseason. The Bucks with Brook Lopez, that's just a weakness. And the Bucks made, the Bucks, Lillard for Drew Holiday basically was a push, but they got rid of Grayson Allen and they kept around a lot of older players. Now it pays off because Giannis signed an extension, but basically the Bucks were a good team that did not improve and got a little worse. And then gave themselves one of the worst playoff coaches that I asked Arturo Galletti about this. You would kill for Budenholzer to come back. Like at this point, you would just be like, bring him back. He's and he was fired for being a good regular season coach, bad playoff coach. You would kill to have him back. Of course, this really sucks, and it's not his fault, but we called it. Again, another back pat we can do, which is the 76ers. Joel Embiid, right? He looked like an MVP. We agreed, and I was just like, there's no way he's going to get the minutes. And here's a funny thing that I'm going to laugh about, Brian. I was wondering if this was curious to you, if this popped up on your head. It's remarkable that he won an MVP last season playing so many minutes. Who was the coach of the 76ers last year? Doc Rivers. And now Joel Embiid is too beat up. So I think it's kind of interesting. Doc Rivers is just Teflon, right? Where he's just able to escape scrutiny. Because I'm now, admittedly, it's a full front office and even Joel Embiid decision, but it is just going. You go back in time to the greats. I'm going to talk Popovich and Phil Jackson. This is Shaquille O'Neal and Tim Duncan, and both of these coaches went, you know what? This guy is a Finals MVP caliber player, and they are getting older. And big players put a lot of wear and tear on their body, and I'm going to make sure they can make it through the regular season so we can win in the playoffs. And what's happened with Joel Embiid is he plays really well in the regular season, makes it to the playoffs, is beat up, and his team doesn't perform. And that happened under Doc Rivers. So fascinating, right? Like Doc Rivers, you could argue, probably helped tank the 76ers, is now on Milwaukee. It is interesting to see what Cleveland and New York will do. I like both of those teams. They look good, but just they're not in the same league as Boston right now. So I think Boston's got a nice clear path, and this has happened before. I think the West is going to beat itself up en route to the finals. If the Golden State Warriors can just freaking bench Klay Thompson, man, Trace Jackson Davis, Podziemski, by the way, I did get a Podziemski rookie card, Brian. I have a couple of them, so maybe I'll send one along. I like those. Podziemski, Trace Jackson Davis, Steph Curry looks like he's out of whatever funk he had. We said he didn't belong in the All-Star game, but I mean, how many 3-pointers has he made in like the last 5 or 6 games? Just a ridiculous amount.
Yeah, he made 11, 9, and then 7 in his last 3 games. Is what I believe it is.
Minnesota, Oklahoma, the Los Angeles Clippers, man, James Harden is a system player, right? He is the system. James Harden, the Denver Nuggets, I think, you mentioned Dallas. Luka's looking great. If Kyrie can be healthy in the playoffs. What was the move they made? You said they made like one of the only moves that mattered.
No, they made a few moves. They got Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. So, solid players, bigger players that they need.
Gafford. Oh, Daniel Gafford quite well, and PJ. I'm not going to give you PJ Washington, although let me just do my due diligence to make sure. Yeah, I won't give you PJ Washington is terrible, but Daniel Gafford, and let's look that up because I want
They
to
might have
see
made a
what
third
happened.
trade as well. They were active.
But Daniel Gafford is a great pickup, and I'm
The
really
rookie Derek
curious.
Lively, who's been surprisingly good, has been hurt. He might even be out for the year. So they just needed someone in the middle, like Gafford.
So Washington keeps their own first round pick in 2024 because it says received a trade exception. First round pick is least favorable, and then Rishawan Holmes and a
Rashawn.
2020 Rashawn. Sorry, thank you. But Rashawn Holmes. So yeah, the U and the A are not separate there, are they? Yeah, that's a great trade by Dallas. They traded like if I remember, it sucks, Brian, when players have been playing for long because I thought he was old. He's only 30, which is old in NBA terms, but now he's been playing for a while. No, like Dallas improved. Luka Doncic is an MVP caliber player. I love the Timberwolves. If it can't be the Nuggets, I think they would be my second favorite to make the NBA Finals. Oklahoma, we're in absolute love with. So it's just like I think the West is going to eat itself, like beat each other up. I think if Boston is smart, they can just make an easy path to the finals. And then it can actually kind of be like what happened last year, where like the Nuggets were the only healthy team that made it to the finals. So that'd be fun.
Yeah, that would be fun. I still like the Bucks. I think Giannis is just good enough that it almost doesn't matter. You know, I guess a comparison I'll make is up until recently, I was a little more complimentary of you of Brook Lopez on the Bucks, even though he's not a good player overall and has a lot of problems. He just does a few things that are really useful for them. He was for a while actually a consistent 3-point shooter, and also did the rim protection right, even though he didn't rebound at all. I feel like Porzingis has done that for the Celtics. I'm actually impressed with what he's done for them. He's been healthy is the main thing. That's been a problem for him in the past. And yeah, I mean, he's been shooting from the outside and protecting the rim despite not rebounding very much. And that's kind of what the Celtics needed. I mean, I'm one of these people that loves defensive players. And when I see a team like Boston over the last few years that has all these guys that can play defense, I'm a big fan of that team. But then when I see them run into problems in the playoffs, like against the Warriors, for example, I feel like they could have won. Like they maybe should have beaten the Warriors, and maybe they didn't have enough offense. So a guy like Porzingis, maybe can help a little bit. And
Well, it's
let's
so
just
funny because
briefly, Derek White has been so good. He should have been an All-Star. Go ahead, Jay.
well, I mean, he didn't have a chance. I mean, I still hate how Yay Points runs the world. I looked at his numbers. He's very Horace Grant, right? Where if you ever have a player that puts up, good points in all categories, one of my favorite all time would be Fat Lever for the Nuggets.
Oh yeah.
You're just not going to get it. Um, which is a bummer. But you actually said when you were talking the Celtics preseason, you were like they could really use a pick me up on offense, and that's why we thought Lillard would be a good pickup. But what's funny is the Celtics already a great defensive squad picked up Drew Holiday, who interestingly enough is an improvement, is probably as good on defense at least as Marcus Smart, but better at other things. So they upgraded that, right? They upgraded their perimeter defense, are still looking freaking fantastic, and they added their offense at the center, which it's really funny because I had not considered that because I was just like Kristaps Porzingis is overrated, right? But when we analyzed the Celtics last year, we were like, actually, if we look at their weakness, it wasn't their starters. Al Horford was quite good, but if we looked at their backups, they were really, really weak at center. So for them to add the missing offense at center, and Porzingis is 7 feet and good at blocking. So as long as other people can rebound, and Jason Tatum is fantastic at it, you are in great shape. So like, it is funny where I think I used my opinion of Porzingis being overpaid as opposed to being like, could he be a good fit? And he's a fantastic fit. And I'm curious if he'll keep it up. But if he keeps up the shooting for the regular season playoffs, I mean, that's just a testament to the Celtics system and using him right, which is really funny because, we go very Billy Bean Moneyball or Billy Beane, the general manager of the Oakland Athletics, this is baseball, would kind of say you'd want to be really wary of picking up players with bad habits because players are who they are. And we've seen this, players like Carmelo Anthony, who we're going to talk in a bit. You're like, oh, okay, if they just took better shots, they'd be a great player. And then you can't talk about taking bad shots. Kristaps Porzingis, it wasn't that he wasn't good at shots. It's just like, oh yeah, if you make his threes a little more open, I'm willing to bet he is a great player, and that has really borne out. Brian, other thing I wanted to touch on, you and I were talking back and forth on this, and I had a funny thing where I thought I was wrong initially. We're going to talk Victor Wembanyama and great 3-point shooting bigs. Now, we've already had the come to Jesus moment where
we've been saying that a lot on the show lately.
Yeah. Well, you and I, it's really funny where I think you and I were both right, but it's like you basically needed to average us. Because I was like, you were like, Kristaps Porzingis is the guy. Draft him number 1, he's going to be great. And I was like, yeah, but players take a while to develop, so it's going to be at least a season before Kristaps Porzingis is great.
Oh, that's funny. I remember it differently. I thought I used to hate Porzingis in the old days.
Or not sorry. No, screw Porzingis. Wembenyama. Sorry, I'm talking about too many 7-footers.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Come to Jesus moment on Victor Wembanyama, because you and I preseason, we both agreed basically you got to take him with the number 1 pick and keep him, take and hold, because rookie contracts are so exploitative. Pre-show, we forgot to talk the Super Bowl, but we were talking this pre-show. I was like, would the 49ers trade Purdy? And you were just like, absolutely not. He's on a rookie contract that's absurd. That basically is the same as when Kawhi was winning Finals MVP with the Spurs, making $5 million a year because he was pick 15. So same idea. It's like you get Victor Wembanyama. He's on a rookie contract for 4 years. You got 4 years to see if this unicorn can figure it out. You got to stick with it. And I was like, but it's going to take him at least a season. Half right. Half a season. Half a season at the NBA. He was terrible. I was looking at numbers. I was just like, Chet Holmgren's the MVP, is the final, or not finals. That would be interesting. Calling it now, Brian. Chet Holmgren, finals MVP. Chet Holmgren, I was like, rookie of the year. Victor's looking good. He's having good games. He's got a high ceiling. He'll figure it out. And he's like, what if I figure it out now, midway season? And so here's what I was throwing to you recently. I looked at the first 10 games of the season of Victor Wembanyama, and he was shooting 29% from 3. And like I said, the reason I thought I had made a mistake is I had said, I texted you about this in the last 2 weeks. I was like, Wembanyama has figured out threes. And I did that little check, and I was like, wait a minute, 29%. He's better than that. I did it wrong. I did the start of the season. I flipped it. Last 10 games, Victor Wembanyama, 42% from 3. I remember we were saying, if you look at Victor Wembanyama from basically 0 to 3 feet, he is ridiculous. He is Shaquille O'Neal-like. And I said, maybe he should stop taking threes. But we also said, this is what you heard, and this is, we're not saying anything shocking. Like everybody has said this. Popovich is like, this is a gimme season. We're just going to let Wembanyama shoot at will because he's basically getting free practices when he plays. He gets, he's on a minutes restriction, like 30 minutes. It's like Victor Wembanyama gets 30 minutes to practice against NBA teams and shoot from wherever he wants. He's figured that out, Brian. 40%, 42% over the last 10 games. Victor Wembanyama figured it out in half a season. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, he's so good. There's so many good young players right now. Yeah, him and Chet. And I mean, do we even consider Halliburton to be young anymore? He is young, but he's already playing like he's in the MVP conversation. So is Shea, who's like 26 or 27. So, yeah, I mean, the NBA is in such good shape. Of course, the old guys are playing well too. There's a big story this week about where LeBron and Bronny are going to be playing together next year, which I'm excited about. But, I mean, Wembanyama might be the most exciting out of all of them. Who is the last prospect that's as exciting as him? Maybe it is LeBron himself 20 years ago. I don't know.
Maybe LeBron. I'm trying to think of a player that had the amount of hype that also seems to have the upside. Now, again, here's what's rough. Here's what's rough about the NBA. Look at Joel Embiid. There is nothing that says
Williamson.
Zion the same. I would agree with you there. But like I said, Andrew gave us this insight, and this is another huge marker against the NCAA. He played overseas, and Andrew basically said he has a team around him that is monitoring his health. And we see the number of players that go through the U.S. system, the U.S. school system, and just have shortened careers. and we look at Victor Wembenyama, and so this could absolutely be special. I think LeBron is it. I mean, I know I was laughing when people were making that comparison when he was in the draft, but I'm talking about a combination of hype and reality as quickly.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I don't think there's, because I mean, certainly there are top
I like
prospects.
your way of evaluating it. I think that's a good way.
And I mean, I'm like I said, I had already expected this. I had already been like, well, I think I said when I looked at his Jeep Elite numbers, I was like, he's not playing great in Jeep Elite. Maybe he won't make the NBA. I saw him in the preseason in the NBA, and I was like, sold. But then I told you preseason, I was like, it's going to take him a while. It's going to take him a while, Brian. So be patient. Half the season, absolutely ridiculous.
I think this is why scouting is kind of a dark art in some ways, right? As far as we're concerned. Because there's just never going to be a sample size, right? The sample size for a young player is always going to be way too small. The scout has got to show up and watch a few games and talk to them a little bit, maybe figure out their personality, how they understand the game, and all that just from a few interactions. It's not easy to do.
I would say I still will hold to that. I think a lot of scouting models, a lot of front office models look at the wrong thing. I brought up the book The Undoing Project by Michael Lewis a lot, where he like talks to Daryl Morey, and like you listen to this stuff Daryl Morey talks about caring about, and if he's being genuine, it's like just might as well be horoscopes and stuff. But I think a comment that's been made, and actually Dean Oliver is the person I remember hearing this made, but it's not a unique comment, of like, you look for fungible stats. You look for players that have weaknesses, and you say to yourself, do I think I can fix this, or do I think this is genuinely an issue? And I do think shot selection is one of those where teams are overconfident on their ability to change players' shot selection. But I think with Victor Wembanyama, it was just a couple things. It was just like, yeah, he's young and inexperienced, and if we teach him these things, he'll be able to score better. And teach him these things, he'll be able to rebound better. And that seems to have held up. So I think that's one of the things about scouting, is knowing which players have stats that are changeable, or just, the easier model we go to, which too many teams pass on, is look for players that do things well, that that they do well, and hire them to do those things and win. But,
yeah,
is what it is.
I mean, let me just throw out an obvious one also. Go for the guy that's big and athletic. Don't go for the smaller guy that's less athletic.
Yeah, if you are going to go for potential, go for the big. You can't teach height. And we have seen lots of big players that just didn't, our favorite is Andre Drummond, didn't look good in college. And I like not look good. It's like they looked fine and came into the NBA and were great. So I would agree with that. All right, Brian, let's get to our second to last fun topic. We're going to talk the All-Star reserves, where starters, I think our only two, I wouldn't even say complaints, but our weak links would have been Damian Lillard and Kevin Durant, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And the All-Star reserves are a little different. I want to check one thing really quick, Brian. I'm just going to take a look at Kevin Durant's recent games. And I need to have better tools for this. I've been saying that forever. One of these days, Brian, and I have too many other side projects. I talk sports and I break cards. Interesting. This can't be right. Okay. Oh yeah, Durant. Okay. I'm just looking at Durant's recent games, Brian. He's playing all right, but not amazing. So I would say he hasn't even like come out of what we were worried about. So it's like, I think Durant got an reputation. Lillard got an reputation. They're both fine. I don't hate them, but they were better players. But when we start to go to the backups, the reserves, tell me if you agree or disagree. I'll say the player, and if I think they belonged in. Bam Adebayo from the Miami Heat. No, and absolutely. I'm gonna drop an F-bomb, Brian. Fuck no with Jimmy Butler not in the All-Star game.
Yeah, I agree. Although I think Butler is missing some games for some reason right now. I don't know if he's sick or hurt or whatever, so maybe he can't even play. I'm not sure.
Yeah, or maybe they didn't want to do a health replacement, or I don't know. They could have just given him the thing. Okay. Paolo Banchero for the Orlando Magic. It's interesting because I thought he had improved, but the reality is he is mediocre. And if we're going to go down why the Orlando Magic are playing so well, Franz Wagner, Goga.
Oh yeah, the Goga's been starting a little bit. Batadze, I think, or Batadze.
Batadze. Jonathan, Isaac, and Joe. Joe Ingles is back, which I love. I love to see because
Isaac getting healthy is a big deal. Like, he's been hurt for a few years now, so it's a big deal for them.
So Paolo Banchero, no, that's just people patting themselves on the back for a number 1 pick. Does not belong, in my opinion. Don't know if you agree or disagree.
Oh, Banchero. No, I pretty much agree. I think he's been better than I thought he would be. I was a little down on him earlier, so he is improving. But I don't think he's the reason why the Magic are playing well.
All right, now this next one, this is going to pain me to even make the comment I'm about to make. Jaylen Brown for the Celtics. First off, absolutely no. But second off, you could even do Porzingis, and I would agree more. I'd be like, Porzingis for shooting 70%. Derek White for production.
He's one of the best defensive players in the league this year. How is he not in the All-Star game? It's unreal. And he's good on offense, too. He's also good on offense.
Yeah, so we both agree. Not only know on Jaylen Brown, it's like there's so many players. Al Horford, how's he doing at his age? Derek White, freaking spectacular. Drew Holiday, love my guy from Milwaukee. So there we go. All right, Brian, we finally get a name that I'm mostly on board with. I don't necessarily think he's the best name. I'll try and compare, but Jalen Brunson from New York. Finally, New York gets someone in there. He's fine. He's like a top 10, 20 guard out east. Let me see if I can give names that I forget. Did Tyrese Halliburton Tyrese Halliburton was a starter, right?
Yep. Yeah, he's a starter.
So Tyrese Halliburton, Scotty Barnes made it 2 off the backup. Donovan Mitchell,
well deserved.
Derek White we should have gone with. Tyus Jones, although, yeah, like Washington, Drew Holiday. So I can give it to you, but yeah, I mean, like Drew Holiday and Derek White not making it. I'm happy for Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson. Julius Randle is going to be a no. Jalen Brunson for the Knicks, happy for it, not against it, not the best, but if you're going to get a representative from a playoff-worthy team, they're top 4 or 5 out east right now, and he's one of the best players on the team, I'm okay with Jalen Brunson.
It's funny because traditionally we've been boosting Jalen Brunson big time when he hasn't been as popular as a player. But now everyone's saying, should he be in the MVP conversation? Well, he's in New York and he's scoring a lot of points per game. So it's a good old points per game thing. But he also plays defense and does everything else. He's a great player. But no, not MVP level.
This is fascinating. I'm really going to have to look at this, Brian, because next one up is Tyrese Maxey, who, here's the thing. He looked really, really good when Embiid was healthy. He has taken a precipitous drop. So there's one of two things going on. Either one, a lot of it was Embiid. 2, he might be injured too. So I think I'm going to say no to Tyrese Maxey, but I almost feel like he's a proxy for Embiid just because they want a player off of that. And the only other player would be Tobias Harris, who is also fine. Like Tyrese Maxey had a really hot start to this season, and Embiid is out injured, so I think I'm okay, but I'm just going to give the heads up of I'm keeping my eye on Maxey because he fell to earth, right? Like at the start of the season, it was like James Harden who? And then now I'm basically like, Tyrese Maxey is what he was last season, which was an above average guard, but nothing special.
Yeah, I want to see more on that. We talked about the Maxey hype in the preseason, obviously, and he was living up to it to start, but now he's gone back down to more like he's been for the rest of his career. So, yeah, let's wait and see. Is he Jordan Poole, where he was just good for a little while and now can't figure it out? I don't think that's likely. I think he's pretty good, and he'll probably pick it back up again.
I've brought this up before, and it's worth saying. Anytime you lose 30 to 40% of your usage mid-season, especially when it's a lot of your salary cap, so it's not easy to replace, that just throws your team into a tailspin because Kristaps Porzingis is the opposite. You take a high usage player, you put them in a team with a better scheme, and maybe their numbers get better. You take a good player like Maxey and suddenly just remove a center that's gaining a lot of attention. Who knows what happens? But like I said, the flip side that I'm worried on is I'm wondering if he's injured because just that drop is a little scary, but I'll reserve
Well,
judgment. We
anytime
can
you have a
go.
young player that's playing really heavy minutes for the first time, you wonder, right? Yeah, they could get hurt.
All right, next one. Finally, another name we like, Donovan Mitchell. This is bizarre, Brian. You heard me read the names, the top guards. Donovan Mitchell is good in Cleveland. I think it's good. Cleveland. I'm. I think they just didn't get any bites that they wanted. But it's funny. You and I were talking about it. You were saying they were thinking about maybe starting to blow it up,
Then
and they
they went
just
on a
held the
big
team.
win streak.
I remember we looked over the numbers and I was like, all of these players are good. They just got some injury. Just
Yeah, we
play
said
through it.
those
You're
news
fine.
reports were BS, I think, at the time, and we were right. Like, they have really good players.
I think sometimes here's why it's so freaking hard to judge reports like that is that those happen two ways. There's the Melo report. We're going to finish up on Melo next, where a player wants off a team and basically leaks, I want off a team and here's where I want to go. And Wojnarowski is like, the Knicks and the Nets are the top front runners for Melo. And really they may not be, right. I heard rumors back in the day from a Nugget exec that he's like, oh yeah, we could have traded him to Seattle for their pick, which turned into Kevin Durant. He's like, oh, we could have traded him to Golden State for Durant, or not Durant, for Curry. And I might have been a fishing story. Like, I once got a fish almost this big, but it's just like Melo was on the block, but the story gets leaked. And then there's the flip side where maybe people want players off the team and they want their people to leak the story so that they can start gauging interest. So it could be that case where people, like, obviously Cavs have a lot of really good assets, Donovan Mitchell included, where if people are trying to get him off it and trying to get interest. But good news, Cleveland kept it together. They're looking like a playoff squad. Donovan Mitchell's an all-star. The world's hell because when he was a young player, very similar to like Wembenyama, I'm like, he's not good yet, and he turned good. So Donovan Mitchell, golf clap, absolutely deserves the all-star nod. Julius Randle, I mean, this yay points player if ever I saw. Isaiah Hartenstein, Dante DiVincenzo miss him off of the Bucks. Jalen Brunson, who did get it. Josh Hart, who the analytics love, even if he doesn't love them. Mitchell Robinson would be good enough per minute. He just hadn't played enough games. He was injured. So Julius Randle's like the seventh best player on the Knicks, just getting it because of points per game. And this infuriates me as a Nuggets fan because the Wolves and the Knicks get good and they get multiple representatives to the All-Star game, and the Nuggets just get Jokic, which infuriates me. So, would you agree? No need for Randle?
No. Randall's definitely a points per game guy. I agree. He's not the guy driving wins on the Knicks.
All right, next one I know makes us both happy. The best Scotty in the history of Scotties in the NBA. Sorry, Pippen, I love you. Scotty Barnes off the Raptors. They've been playing so terrible. They traded away average players, but that made them worse. So I'm really happy he got the recognition because he is one of the top wings in the league. Like, it's a hard one to say because Toronto, we were so psyched with how they had been doing with Masai Ujiri. And it seemed like they forgot it or whatever. But the reality we've given to any team, this is what you're saying about the Bucks with Giannis. You have a top player, you got hope. Scotty Barnes is like a top 20 player in the NBA right now. So I am really happy he got that recognition.
Yeah, if he can become a consistent three-point shooter, man, he's going to be really good. Because right now he looks like a young Kawhi, right? Like, does everything. Maybe isn't a consistent shooter yet. If he can do that, yeah, look out for MVP Scotty Barnes.
All right, Trae Young for the Atlanta Hawks. He is a fascinating one. A player he reminds me of, at least just numbers wise, would be Deron Williams back in the day. He's fine. Like, Trae Young is fine. He's looked really good, but this season he's about average. But he's a high points per game player. I'm not happy with this pick, especially with how many other bad play. Like, here's the thing: like, with how many guards made it, including good guards, Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell. Why on earth do you go for Trae Young out east as an injury replacement? That to me just seems absolutely ridiculous. Let's see. I'm trying to think the top name I would pick. Jared Allen off of Cleveland wouldn't be half bad. We already said Derek White deserves some love.
Yeah, for guards, definitely Derek White. Even Drew Holiday on Boston would also be better. Dante DiVincenzo, like you said.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a half bad. Yeah, DiVincenzo would be fun. Clint Capella, that wasn't going to get the nod. We
Looks
know
like
why,
there's
right?
interesting. Not as many good guards in the East this year.
But they're already on the team, so
Yeah.
it's not horrible. But it's like, why would you put a guard there? All right, let's get through the West now. The top one's interesting. Definitely a yay points guy. Probably a little overrated, which is Devin Booker. Who is quite good though. I mean, he passes my threshold, 150 wins per 48. So does it, has a high ceiling, right? Has scored over 60 points in a game. Not super mad at it, but
Well, look
don't
at
think
this
he.
way. We already said Durant is not having the best year. Of course, Beal's been hurt almost all year. Booker is, they've kind of had to depend on him this year.
Yeah. And yeah, Beal is sad. We've talked about that. It was such a just keep. Had they just kept Chris Paul, that would have been a better move. But is what it is. Steph Curry. Now, good news by the way, Brian. Per minute right now, Steph Curry is now better than Devin Booker. He's come back, and we've noted that it is kind of fine in all-star games if you go on reputation a little, right? Previous season. So this year, maybe Steph Curry doesn't belong, although he passes my threshold for belonging, and past him certainly belongs. So I'm not mad at this one at all.
Steph Curry is interesting. He had a great start to the year, as the Warriors did. He was up over zero point 0.2 wins per minute, for 48 rather. Not great for him, but pretty good. He fell all the way down almost to 0.100 per minute, to almost being an average player. Like, that's how bad of a stretch he had. But the last few weeks, he's gotten up almost to, 0.15 again, so halfway in between. So he's had a roller coaster of a season, with some really hot games lately and some really poor games kind of in the middle of the first half of the season. People are speculating that the time they got off from the coach dying might have rested up Steph Curry. He has like healthier legs now.
Oh yeah,
So that's one of those
we didn't
sad
talk. That
things,
was a real
but
bummer.
it might be helping Steph Curry right now.
All right, next one, easy. Anthony Davis for the Lakers. We love this guy. He's a great player, playing good this season. Obviously injury concerns. Won the in-season tournament though. I'm absolutely like basically the Lakers are Anthony Davis, LeBron James. Not much else. We can give you Austin Reeves, so I'm
Yeah.
fine with Anthony Davis making it. All the act like basically like Devin Booker and Curry were like, well, do they have the recognition? Do they have the this? Do they have the that? I'm like, Anthony Davis checks all the marks that he needs to get in. Anthony Edwards is fascinating, where I would argue, not just argue, I would say by the numbers, he is the third best Wolf, which is good. He actually has turned it around. He was a pretty weak rookie. We were like, is he ever going to be good? And he actually looked like he was having good improvement last year, very similar to Maxey. Carl Anthony Towns got injured. Edwards seemed to go on a free fall. This season, Carl Anthony Towns is healthy. Anthony Edwards is looking like what we expect. This blew my mind, Brian, and changed my mind a little. I'm forgiving all these players I was super dour on young. I'm changing my mind on. Someone pointed out Anthony Edwards this season is as young as Dwayne Wade was when he entered the NBA.
Yep.
And his numbers look a heck of a lot like Dwayne Wade when he entered the NBA.
Oh, I love seeing stuff like that.
So that's what's rough is I'm just like, this freshman in college was terrible. Why would you think he's the future? And it's like, well, imagine if you gave him 2 more years, what he might be. And that's, you were saying the same thing. I'm like, scouting is so hard. Is it's just like we're grading one and done players on 40 games of data, and who knows the system they are in. It's even harder overseas, especially if they're a top prospect, because like I said, I'm really just starting to suspect, not even just suspect, this is overt with, say, Wembenyama, go, his team is telling him to focus on different things than I think is needed. They're going, you don't need to prove you can win in this league. You need to work on these things so you can do them in this other league. And you need to do these things to show the scouts that you can do them when they come by. And so I'm just like, oh, his box score is terrible. And he's like, I don't care about my box score. I care about how I look to a scout. Anthony Edwards, possibly a similar thing. He's looking really good this season. Now, I would basically say you would probably want to go to Gobert, but I'm okay with Gobert not getting it. He's an interesting cat. And Anthony Edwards, it's so hard not to like him. He's got these great dog photos he does like on social media. There was a great clip of him going around where he was just like, I love it when he said something like, I love it when the opposing team double teams me. Carl Anthony Towns is our best offensive player. When they double team me, he's just going to feast. I love it. So it's like, this is one of those players where I'm like, he barely hits the criteria I want for an all-star player, and it's hard not to like his personality. So I am fine with this, and I'm actually starting to get psyched with the Wade comparison.
Yeah, that's awesome. And again, when he's so young, some of the reasons why his overall numbers don't look good is things like turnovers that he can improve, and with the things that he does well, you really like. And yeah, I like that Wade comparison. Because yeah, Dwayne Wade as a young player, he's just getting the ball and he's just going to the rack every time, and Edwards is kind of doing that too. That's awesome.
All
But
right.
okay, to your point though, Gobert absolutely should have made it, I think.
It's yeah, I don't know. He's kind of a yeah. He's funny, Mr. I've heard the points like he's always going to get snubbed because of the COVID gaffe, and it's hard. So I think he deserves it. He made the point when he
He's
gets into the
probably
hall
the best defensive player in the league, so to me, you can't
easily,
leave that guy out of the
kind of the
All-Star
best
game.
modern one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I'll give you that. Especially because the last player that I'll just get out of the way, say I'm completely fine, is Karl Anthony Towns. Also made the All-Star game. Same kind of thing. Reasonable player to make it. Top player, one of the top players on the top team. To exclude Rudy Gobert off of the Timberwolves when you send two representatives is a little off. Again, I remain offended because let me see. Aaron Gordon is about as good per minute as Karl Anthony Towns, and is better per minute than Anthony Edwards. Jamal Murray, had some injury and has been up and down. Yeah, Jamal Murray's so rough because I think he's an all-star and would be by like the Trae Young kind of metric. He just cannot stay healthy enough during the regular season. He's only played 40 games. So like I think Aaron Gordon should get an all-star nod, and so I'm upset when I see the last couple right. So Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns both got a nod. I'm okay with both, but um, I'm like Aaron Gordon should definitely get a nod. Last two, Brian, let's just do these together because one is a shoe-in. You've even said he's an MVP dark horse for you. Kawhi Leonard, amazing season he's having. He is currently fifth in wins. He would get a wins per 40 or wins produced box score geeks vote right now if we were voting on MVP players. Amazing season, absolutely deserves that all-star nod. He's back. Clippers are playing great. Paul George, I'm going to have to say no. And the reason why, Brian, is the player we already said, James Harden. Should be
Yeah.
James Harden. And James Harden has only played 2 fewer games than Paul George. He's playing absolutely ridiculous. Paul George, we think this is the classic. He might be an okay player at small forward, but he's playing out of position at power forward, which is probably helping the team because you have Kawhi, James Harden, Zubats, Russell Westbrook, Norman Powell's getting a lot of minutes, Terrence Mann, of course. So it's just like he's playing where he needs to. Even then, even if I count him as a small forward, he still wouldn't be good enough, and I'd give it to James Harden. So if we're talking the two conferences, basically out west, I wouldn't give the nod to Paul George because I would give it to James Harden. And out east, man, it was most of the list outside of Jalen Brunson and Donovan Mitchell and Scotty Barnes. I'm like, what are these players doing here?
Yeah, the East didn't do as well as the West there. It's funny when Harden first came over to the Clippers, he was playing really well right away, but the Clippers weren't winning that much. It didn't have a very good record, and we were baffled. Like, this team looked really good to us. And I feel better now because now they're the number one seed or close to it anyway. They just rattled off 1,000,000 wins and everyone's playing well. So to me, the Clippers are the team to beat. Even hearing your explanation earlier about the West beating up on themselves and letting the Boston Celtics have an easy route, I don't care. I still think the Clippers are the best team for me right now.
Well, I mean, it's a funny so what I'm saying is I think you're right in the Clippers for kind of the Giannis reason. The Clippers are now like a top X seed, right? Top 4 seed. And yeah, this is fun. I'll get to circle us back to Doc Rivers. So the Clippers are a top X seed, and Kawhi is one of the best players, right? Because if we just look at the top of the NBA in general, so let's list the best players right now. Giannis, Shea, oof. So Oklahoma, but the one thing I've heard, and like Arturo has backed this up, is like young teams their first go round usually don't get the star whistles and usually aren't as experienced. Whereas Kawhi, Paul George, Russell Westbrook, heck, even Zubats, James Harden, these players have playoff pedigree though James Harden falls in the. This is hard. There are too many ifs and ands, but I think you're right. I'd give the nod to the Clippers over the Thunder. So basically, Giannis, Shea, Jokic, Doncic, Kawhi, then Harden. So basically, right now, the Clippers have two players in the top 10 and one player in the top five. And the good news, Giannis is in another conference. Shea is on a younger team. Jokic's team right now just is a little weaker, though. I would, you always fear the Nuggets come playoff time. Doncic kind of the same thing, is currently on a bottom seed. So I'm inclined to agree with you. The Clippers have two players in the top 10 in wins produced right now. They're a top four seed. They've got a lot of experience. And the one reason I was going to look back in time and go, like, the Clippers are one of these teams that when they were a contender from 2013 to, I'd argue, 2016, they lost. But Brian, interestingly enough, what the heck happened in 2013? They had Vinny Del Negro, and they lost in the first round to the Memphis Grizzlies.
Is that like what
Oh,
Elton Brand
that's
years or not quite? A
this
little
is
after?
rough. This is the annoying part about divisions. First off, 2013 in the NBA, it looks like it was just ridiculous. Oklahoma City 60 wins, Denver Nuggets 57 wins, Los Angeles Clippers 56 wins, Spurs 58 wins, Grizzlies 56 wins. So the Clippers were a 56-win team that had to play a 56-win team in the first round of the playoffs. And the Memphis Grizzlies by SRS were worse than the Clippers, but were the sixth best team. So that's ridiculous. And this was like the Clippers, like this was their second time in the playoffs. Oh, the year before it was lockout shortened. And they ran into the Spurs. They ran into an all-time Spurs team the year before. So is what it is. Yes, but the Clippers, when they were losing, when they were a contender, had Doc Rivers. And actually, I should know this. Who is the Clippers coach right now? It is
Oh, it's
Lue.
Ty Lue, and he's actually considered to be a very good coach.
Well, championship pedigree, won a title with the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2016. So I'm a fan. I like it. I like your take, Brian. All right, let's wrap this up with silliness. Carmelo Anthony, a piece that I've had on the back burner. One of these days, I'll finally write it, Brian, is that Carmelo Anthony is the poster child for the wages of wins and is a poster child for the analytics movement. By that, what I mean is when we talk about analytics, we often think about it in terms of front offices. Who should you sign? Who should you win with? We don't flip it on its head and think the other way of being, if you are a player, how do you maximize analytics to maximize what matters to you, which is your pay? Carmelo Anthony looked like he read the wages of wins and stumbling on wins, took the knowledge in there and said, how can I maximize my career as an NBA player? And it is worth noting that if it weren't for the fact that Carmelo Anthony was drafted the same year as LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony would be, bar none, the most successful player by earnings, endorsements, etc. of his draft by like a country mile. It is only because LeBron James is in the same draft, and LeBron James has broken the scales. There is no player in the history of the NBA that has been as old with as many miles as LeBron James to play as well as he is playing. LeBron James makes no sense. So Carmelo Anthony, though, was like, how do I maximize my draft stock? How do I maximize my pay in the NBA? How do I get into a big market, go to New York? Now, love all that, but now where stuff is falling apart is post-career. Carmelo Anthony announced his retirement with a really weird commercial. Like, go watch Melo's retirement commercial. It's bizarre. He's like talking to his kid, but it's just weird. And post-career, he has really been kind of torpedoing his relationship with the Nuggets in almost a Shaq-like manner. But Shaq seemed to attack individual players, although Melo's done that too. Shaq seemed to have a problem with Dwight. But Shaq eventually mended the rift with Orlando and just got his jersey retired. But Melo, as saying he felt, dishonored that the Nuggets gave his jersey to Nikola Jokic. It's worth noting Nikola Jokic was like picked in the second round during a Taco Bell commercial. That's one of the most famous parts of his story now, is that instead of showing the draft when he was drafted, they were playing commercial. It was a Taco Bell commercial when he was drafted. Jokic has had that number his whole life, so they were just like, this is the second rounder, we'll just give him the number. Everybody was probably expecting someday we'll retire Melo's number. And now he's kind of going on revisionist history, and I think it's something smoke. It's the Barnes podcast, Matt Barnes.
Yeah, I think
Matt
it's
Barnes
all
has
the smoke.
all the smoke. Thank
Yep.
you. He has a podcast called All the Smoke. He had Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony on, good friends. They've known each other forever, both drafted in the 2003 draft. Melo went 3. Wade went 5. Something that drives me nuts, Brian, a thing that just keeps me up at night is, had the Detroit Pistons drafted Melo number 2 instead of Darko, what could it have been? And on all fronts. And so, like, one of the things that drives me bad is the Nuggets were really high on Wade. So I think if Melo goes number 2, Wade goes to the Nuggets at number 3, I think we could have won a title. That's Andre Miller, Dwayne Wade, Marcus Camby, Nene Hilario. You just get one 3-point shooter in the mix and it's over. That keeps me up at night. Melo, of course, would have won a title with the Pistons because they had Darko on the bench, and I think Melo would have developed into a much different player because he would have been behind Rip Hamilton and Chauncey Billups and Rasheed Wallace, and he wouldn't have been behind. He probably. So that's the other funny thing is they probably would not have traded for Rasheed Wallace because they would have had Melo, but Melo probably would have learned a different style and maybe been a different player. So that keeps me up at night. But so Melo and Wade, both 2003, top picks, we're on all the smoke, and Barnes asks Melo about New York. And Melo says he didn't demand a trade to New York. And this is so weird, Brian, because this is like the other era thing. When I'm talking Kristaps Porzingis and comparing his numbers to 2001 and now, this is very like Last Dance, because the Last Dance just came out, which is, Michael Jordan basically having creative control of a bunch of stories that are told about the Bulls in the 90s. And, I love Michael Jordan. I love the stories. We saw one of the fallouts is that, Jerry Krause's widow, the general manager of the Bulls, got booed at a ceremony because of all the stories MJ told. But it's just like a lot of these stories are verifiable. And he just kind of spun his narrative, which is wild. And I mean, I want to give like two sides of this coin. Like another player I'll give, we had the amazing Scott Williams, also a member of the Bulls in the 90s, 91 through 93, 3-time title winner, amazing player, amazing guest, just fantastic. I was talking to him about his history and looking his stuff up, and he got suspended in Game 7 of the finals that sent Allen Iverson to the finals. And he's just like, that crushed us and probably took us out. And he was right. Like, I looked up the numbers, and basically Scott Williams getting suspended, and him when he tells that story and I look up the facts, I'm like, oh, he's right. He's 100% right. Whereas there's some, Michael Jordan stories you look up and you're like, this doesn't line up.
That's one of the best parts about Scott Williams being on here, by the way, is whenever we talk about Allen Iverson, we usually say overrated as a player, but he had this speech, the practice speech and everything. We recognize his place in NBA history. Scott Williams, no, he just buried Allen Iverson. I loved it.
Well,
very entertaining.
This is a compliment I've given Scott Williams before, and I even said at the top of this article, I had this big article, and I called it like the true usage curve, and it was basically about this point where you can literally plot a curve of how well you have to shoot to get 20 points per game. And if players can stay to the left of that curve, score 20 points per game, they get max money. And as soon as they fall to the right of it, they fall off. And this is why Kobe is an all-time great. Kobe was able to score over 20 points a game every healthy season he had in his NBA career after year 3 or 4, and he came in as a high schooler, which is why you should look at Kobe is overrated production wise, but any player in the NBA, same as Melo, maximizing their earnings, should look up to Kobe and be like, what do I have to do to be like Kobe? Because he made 25 to 28 million his last season in the NBA. That is modern day money. Almost, oh my God, Brian, almost 2 decades ago. That's wild to think about.
And the GM, Mitch Kupchak, got fired.
Yep. And it wasn't, he didn't want to, I'm fairly certain he didn't want to do it, and the Buses said he had to. But
yeah, bet you're right. That's directly coming from the Bus family, right?
Yeah. But that's just funny, yeah. They make the GM make a bad move and throw him under the bus. Dolan, ironically,
throw him under the bus, Dre. Is that right?
Oh, it was right there. That was unintentional. That's going to make me sad. And the exact same thing, by the way, happened with Carmelo Anthony when he went to New York. We're going to talk that, which is just Carmelo Anthony gets traded to New York, and I want to say Walsh. Let me make sure I get the GM right. Yeah, Donnie Walsh was the exact. And Donnie Walsh he gets in charge of the Nets, Knicks, not Nets, the Knicks.
Yep.
He spends years grabbing good players. He makes good signings, and then the owner is like, trade them all for Melo. It's worth noting Jamal Murray was picked with one of the draft picks they traded for Melo that came to the Nuggets. So it's just like the Knicks gave everything away. And for what it's worth, in this interview on All the Smoke with Matt Barnes, Melo even says it. He says he came to New York and everybody's like, they're like, we traded the whole team for you. You better be good. But he says he didn't demand a trade, and this feels very Last Dance-ish. But what makes it so different is when Michael Jordan was doing it, there were beat reporters, right? There was the Jordan Rules of the book that came out about MJ. And that's kind of what you had. You had tabloids and you had a lag, right? If there's a story, if, Michael Jordan goes and gambles when he's not supposed to, you might get lucky if that's a story a couple days later, and it might even get buried, right? Like someone on the team or someone on Michael Jordan's team or someone from Nike might hear about the story and be able to smooth it over, and it's not news. Whereas in the modern era, stuff happens and we hear about it immediately, and there's a Waj bomb, and was Waz faster, was Shams faster, et cetera, et cetera. When Melo was demanding a trade out of Denver, that was like early days of us blogging. I remember that. Like I wrote articles about like ideal picks. I was grading possible trade destinations, and I remember I was like, would it be a good idea to trade Carmelo Anthony for Blake Griffin? Because exact point I've made before, right? Like Blake was a rookie. We don't know what we're going to get. Whereas, could we get established players that would have been good? Apparently, Melo says that George Karl wanted to trade him to Utah, which is really funny because actually, I'm going to see if I can get this name up really quick because I don't have the interview up in front of me. But there was a player on Utah. Was like, he wanted Derek Favors in return, which I would have liked that trade. I really liked Derek Favors back in the day. But Melo's trying to kind of pull a Last Dance and tell stories. And the problem is it's a different era, right? We don't have a lag in stories that were going on. We don't have, only being able to kind of have secondhand accounts. We had like play-by-play accounts of this entire thing going on. Melo 100% wanted out of Denver, and I got to throw this to him, Brian, though. Melo, if for nothing else, I love you for this. So he was like explaining why he left the Nuggets, and what he said is, he said, well, he didn't want to leave the Nuggets, but the Nuggets were going to be in rebuild mode. And his logic for why the Nuggets were going to be in rebuild mode is they traded away Dante Jones. Does that name ring a bell to you at all, by the way, Brian? Dante
It does.
Jones.
It does.
Wow, really? You remember Dante Jones?
Sure.
Really? So what do you remember about Sorry, I'm being an ass. What do you remember about Dante Jones?
I mean, actually, it might be a different Dante. Well, I'm thinking of the guy that had all these mental health problems after he left the league, but that might be a different player.
No, so nothing wrong with Dante Jones. He was picked first in the first round in the 2003 draft. So Melo draft was picked 20th overall. He played with the Denver in 08 and 09. He played 79 games, 18.1 minutes a game, where he averaged 5.4 points.
Oh, no, this is a totally different player than the player I'm thinking of.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Yeah, so he averaged 5.4 points, 1 assist, 2 rebounds per game. And if you look him up, if you look up his like wins per 48 numbers, he's like 0.036. Like he's not good enough to be on the modern day Boston Celtics. They'd cut him. He'd be like 23rd on the modern Celtics. He's that bad. So Melo going, they traded this bench player, and that told me it was over and they were going to be in rebuild mode. Now, the reality with Melo was if you were going to be a team giving Melo a max, you didn't have money for other players. So Melo probably recognized that. And I know his wife at the time, I think, wanted to go to New York for like good career opportunities. So what is frustrating to me is Melo could say easily, I love my time with the Nuggets, but I decided that going to New York was a better fit for my family. And then he could even pull a Shaq, where like Shaq has done this. He's gone back and like apologized to Penny Hardaway and been like, I was young, maybe I had an ego, maybe back in the day I stick around. So Melo could say that. Melo could literally say, I made a decision that was good for my lifestyle at the time. I can't be mad at New York. He even brings that up. He says he got married in New York and was like, I have to come play here. So he said he didn't want to play in New York, then said he got married in New York, was like, oh, I have to come to New York. And you're like, Not sure that order of operation tracks, but I'll give it to you. But it's been really wild to watch Melo after his retirement. And I think the honest truth, and this kind of sucks, is I think in the back of his head, he probably just thought after he retired, the Nuggets would retire his jersey. He'd get into the Hall of Fame, which he will. He'll be first ballot. Anybody who says otherwise is wrong. He'll be first ballot. He'll get his laurels. And then Nikola Jokic kind of came out of nowhere and is like completely eclipsed it. And Melo doesn't know how to handle it. Now, my 2 cents is he should definitely do the man, I really hope the Nuggets are happy putting, 15 up there for both Jokic and Melo. That would be something. The Nuggets are great. He could even be like, hey, I turned into Jamal Murray. You can't be mad at that, right? But he's just kind of gone on the offensive and now lying. And it is showing a difference in era, like him versus MJ, where it's just like, I'm sorry, that doesn't work because we were all online. We were all watching stuff. We all have and I could go do the research. I can go back to LeBron's day or to Michael Jordan's day, which, by the way, it didn't overlap. Scott Williams, though. Scott Williams bridged the gap between LeBron and MJ. I can go back to Michael Jordan day and look over microfiche to find old articles or look through books. I can go back to Melo's day and find minute by minute Twitter accounts, if they're still around, if Elon hasn't tanked that aspect of Twitter, and just see this isn't true. And it's just a different era. And it's just so bizarre. And maybe, that's the funny thing is, a comment that was made about Melo at the end of his career, which I disagreed with, was that the game had passed him by. And I was like, the game didn't pass Melo by. He just got old. He can't score 20 points a game anymore. It's not that Melo doesn't know how to exist in the modern NBA. It's that he's old, and I feel that. I feel that I couldn't play in the NBA at my age right now, which is a bummer. LeBron, stick around. We need the old guys to stick around a little longer. The game didn't pass him by, but now the PR game I think has, and so that's kind of amusing to watch all this.
Yeah, I mean, I had something good to say, but then your PR comment tilted me. That's really funny. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why he would say this. It doesn't make any sense at all. That's all I'll say.
And yeah, I mean, it's just so wild because here's what's getting rough for me is that despite the fact that I started my NBA blogging career bashing Melo, my first piece at Wins Produced, I had a ever topical title about making a Wizard of Oz reference, Brian, the Wizard of Oz, where I basically said, does the wizard have Melo's help or something, or I forget. Because Melo said he needed more help, and I was like, all of your help is on the bench, and they're not playing because, all of these expensive starters, you, Kenyon Martin, are getting the starters minutes, and if you played players like I just dropped his name, sadly, really good player, out of the league, choked a coach. Weird stuff.
Latrell Sprewell?
Not Latrell Sprewell. Another.
Oh, there's another coach that got choked.
Multiple. Yeah. So, but basically, my point was just I started my career as a Melo hater, and even towards the end, I was just like, he's gonna go into the Hall, and it's fine, and he knows what he was doing to get paid. And even as a Nugget, I was like, of course they're gonna retire his jersey, and I'm getting to the point. I'm like, Melo, I was one of your biggest critics, and I have turned into one of your biggest defenders. And you are getting to the point because I've seen Denver fans when the Nuggets were in the finals, George Karl was even saying, he's like, hey, all the Nuggets should be in the stands. I got to see David Thompson take the first shot, whatever the first pitch equivalent is, a free throw essentially at the game that they won, which is awesome. So it's George Karl was even like, yeah, Melo should be in the stands. And people are like, good riddance. And I'm like, give it a break. We should mend fences. I'm like, Melo should get his number retired. It's fine. It's fine. And even I'm getting to the point where I'm like, Melo, I was on your side. I've been defending you. You're making it really, really hard, man. Stop it.
Skywalker David Thompson, one of our top tier nicknames from the nickname show.
Top tier nickname. And again, I am going to have to give myself a red. I'm not going to leave the podcast. So let's do whatever sport would maybe do. I'm going to give myself
just
a red
yellow
flag.
Card. Maybe if you get another, there's a
I can give myself a red card, but after this, I'll count this game as it. So, and then we'll count next week, right? Because we go every week. So I'm kicked out of next week's game, Brian, next week's podcast.
What is let me just say this. What is the argument for him getting his number retired by the Nuggets? I mean, he didn't win anything for the Nuggets.
He scored. I mean, he passed Alex. Was it Alex English? He passed Alex English's record of points scored with the Nuggets. Arguably,
Alex English's career with the Nuggets is way better, though, wasn't it?
He was fine.
in terms of efficiency and
You're
overall.
trying to get me in trouble, Brian, which is fine. Alex English, also another overrated scorer. Don't tell anybody I said that because he's an all-time Nugget great. But no, I
I
mean,
mean, neither of them were a fat lever, that's for sure.
yeah, exactly right. Fat Lever deserves all the stuff, but it's just like, no, I mean, you could make the argument people judge the wrong players. It's really, Andre Miller and Marcus Camby, but you could argue Melo brought them back to prominence, right? We went really far in the, we made it out of the first round once. We did well in the playoffs with Melo. He scored a lot of points for us. I don't mind that. I've kind of made that point too, where I don't mind players getting their jersey retired for lower bars than other people have. But I'm hitting the point with Melo where I'm like, your accolades, which were enough. Again, this was before the Nuggets. Don't forget when you're like, he didn't win anything with them. The Nuggets didn't win anything their entire time in the NBA. We haven't had a title until the last year.
So
So it's
then he
just like,
needs to stay there for his whole career to get his
yeah.
number
So it was,
retired.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's what happened though. Is I think Jokic and now Murray too, by the way, because Murray's coming after Melo's numbers and stuff as well, raise the bar on being an all-time Nugget. And what's funny is the strategy is you can't go on the offense, then you actually need to go like team up, and he didn't do it. So it's just kind of, it's weird. I don't
How
get
long
it.
was he
And
there for? Was it like 7 or 8 years, something like that?
he was there for his first four. It was seven because he and I 6.5 because he went during
Okay.
that. And that was what was interesting is I remember when the players from that 2003 draft were signing extensions. LeBron and Wade signed 5-year extensions, and Melo only signed a 3-year. And so, actually, it was 8. So it was 8 years, or
I
maybe
don't think
Melo
this is
signed a 5.
controversial at all.
Well, here's what I'm saying. Here's what's annoying me is I was basically like, it's fine, just retire as a number, it's okay. And I'm agreeing. A lot of people are like, well, why would you retire as a number? What did he win? Whatever, whatever. And now I'm starting to come on the side where I'm like, Melo, if you're going to be biting the hand that feeds you this badly, just move on. And then what's the last thing to finish up on is, like I said, there's so many easy outs. He can even go after management. He can go at, he can just be like, hey, stuff was in disarray. Don't forget that like Masai and George Karl got kicked at the same time, right? Like
Right.
there's so much stuff he could go after to kind of deflect, and he's going after the wrong things, and he's going after the wrong things in a way where I'm just like, sorry, Melo, I'm out. And to your point, I think this wasn't a like 80-20 decision where he's shedding votes. I think it was like a 50-50 decision. I'm telling you, he's starting to lose the people like me that were in the middle.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
And you know what? By the way, I'm okay with this too, Brian. He made the NBA 75th anniversary team. You got your one out, Melo. You ate it, so we're good.
Hey, the one thing I'll say is that one year he was at Syracuse, they won the March Madness tournament. That was a memorable season for me. That was heck of a season.
Although I think I've looked that up before, and I know like Andrew, I don't know the college numbers as well, say like you and Andrew, but I remember looking that up, and it wasn't Melo that played really well that season.
Oh,
or
that
even
could have been.
the
They had other NBA players, like they had like Jerry McNamara. They had like a good power forward also. I don't know. That was a long time ago, Dre.
Yeah, I
Carmelo's
can't remember.
retired now.
Yep. Okay, Brian. Well, that was all the topics I had to get to. Anything else you want to end on? We actually had a pretty long show, so I'll take that.
No, I'm good. Yeah, I mean, we've got the All-Star game coming up now, midway point of the NBA season. We have the buyout market going on. That usually doesn't mean a lot for a lot of teams, but maybe it will. Yeah, it's going to be... I mean, I heard you saying early in the show that there was a year where all these teams with 56 wins face each other in the playoffs. It feels like it's going to be like that this year. Maybe the body of work won't be as good, but I think there's some really good teams heading into the playoffs right now.
Yeah, I think I'm hoping for the Celtics. I'll give it that. I like Jeff May. I like Arturo Galletti. If it can't be the Nuggets, I'm hoping for a Celtics Timberwolves finals, and I hope it goes to Game 7.
Shout out to Jeff May for speaking out against sports ball memes. I agree with him on that. It's a very lazy joke.
No one cares about the Superbowl. Although I'm going to throw this out so let's go into shout outs. So I'll throw this out, Brian. I actually have started pack breaking on Jeff May's YouTube channel on Mondays. I tried 8:15 this week, realized my mistake. That'd be 6:15 your time. So 9 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. It looks like I'm going to break cards. I showed at the beginning of the show, I broke an Artist Gilmore autograph card. I wanted a Victor Wembenyama rookie card, did not get it, but this is a nice consolation prize. Artist Gilmore, all-time great, didn't go into the Hall of Fame until 2011. Absolutely egregious. ABA champion with the Kentucky Colonels. Great player for the Bulls. Great player for the Spurs. Absolutely amazing player. So happy to have that not MVP autograph. So I've been breaking on Hey There Jeffro is the channel. So check me out there. And then of course you already mentioned Jeff May, which we like. And during Super Bowl halftime with Adam Todd Brown, he broke cards. And it was like the Champions League, and they had these little animals in them. I don't know why. So it was sports players, but he drew an owl. So during Super Bowl Sunday, he was breaking packs of cards,
that's so
and he
funny.
pulled an owl. So I've told him I'm going to start calling it Super Owl Day in honor of the owl he picked. So that's the shout out I'll give. Hey there, Jeffro. Check it out. Heck, you'll even see me breaking cards there. And we might do more card breaking here and there in the future, Brian. It's a project you and I have discussed.
Yep.
Any shout outs you got?
No, I mean, that's it. Yeah, it's going to be fun to do that pack breaking.
All right. Well, and we got fun stuff there. Andrew Sutton has gifted us a pack of, or a hobby box of NBA Hoops 2023-2024. So at some point, Brian, we'll have to do that on this show or somewhere around there. So anyway, if you found us not through the website, you can find the stats at boxscoregeeks.com. You can find us any place podcasts are found, the Boxscore Geeks Show. We go live most Tuesdays, every other, around 9 p.m. We've been a little earlier too, Brian. So around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, twitch.tv/nerd numbers. I'll try and start getting the recaps up at Boxscore Geeks maybe. And then we do have the Nerd Numbers channel on YouTube, which again, maybe some of these points, I'm juggling too many plates, Brian, but we'll try and do that. But you can find myself and Brian on X, formerly known as Twitter, that you can find at twitter.com. Nerd Numbers for myself, Boxscore Brian for Brian. We'll catch you in 2 weeks.